Well, welcome and thank you for joining me tonight on Podcast Tips with Rob Greenlee. It's great to have you here with me and joining me again on the show. The topic tonight that I'm going to dive into is a little bit of a different one to some degree, is answering the question, are you getting tuckered out yet as a content creator? And because many podcasters juggle a lot of demands in their lives of, being a podcaster, and as well as in our guest's particular situation, she is a wife and a mother of two, but she also hosts and produces a podcast called Tuckered Out with Ami Thakkar. And she's going to really kind of peel the onion back on this question of the time that it takes for a podcast and the time that it takes for your life, and to help you have a kind of a glimpse into how maybe you can balance your life, but also talk about, some of the important issues that Ami is bringing to her podcast in episode 27 of the show tonight, of Podcast Tips with Rob Greenlee. And so thank you. Ami's mission, though feeling a little tuckered out sometimes, she has never lost her passion for storytelling and genuine human connections. And so this is a big part of why she's doing this show, is that she feels compelled to make connections, to share unique perspectives in her community, and bringing that to podcasting. And her and I kind of see the world with a fairly common lens of trying to build community and do those kind of things. So I'm going to bring her up here in a second, but I wanted to share a couple things with you so you understand what's coming up in the episode. Please participate in the live Q&A toward the end of the show, and then post a Q at the beginning of your question in the comments area. And we would love to have you send us a question and stuff. And I will start in the StreamYard platform, and then we will address them one by one after we do our giveaway at the end of the show. So the StreamYard giveaway is going to happen. So just enter the hashtag #TheYard into the comment field of any of the viewing platforms that you happen to be using right now. And I will show up on the screen here a few of those that I think a lot of people jump in and try and do it in advance of the show. And that's actually a really smart thing. So let me go in. I'm going to make sure that the giveaway tool, which StreamYard has as well, it's at StreamYard.com giveaway. And so if you have a StreamYard account, you can come in and use this tool with your podcast. And it's really easy to use. You can also set up your own hashtag if you want to in the tool. So you can create your own hashtag that's used on all the social platforms. So that's the power of this. It kind of combines the ability to use a hashtag in the social platforms, and at the same time get your audience entered. But it also has the ability of not requiring a hashtag. So anybody that posts a question or a comment automatically gets added to the giveaway at the end. So you can use it without a hashtag as well. And I want to remind everybody, if you're watching this on some other platform, that this is being streamed live on YouTube right now at the StreamYard channel. And and then also on LinkedIn, off of the StreamYard. It's not being streamed off of the website or StreamYard, but it's being streamed off of LinkedIn and Twitter X and all those platforms as well. So let me turn this music off, and we can kind of move on with the show. I don't want to annoy you with too much music playing. So anyway, let's go ahead and pull up onto the screen our guest, Ami, who's calling in, and let's get her up on the screen right now. So she's going to add to the stage. Ami, thank you for joining me on the show. Great to have you.
How are you?
I'm doing okay. I mean, this is episode 27 of this show. I've been doing this show 27 times, pretty much every week for 27 weeks. So I think I've only missed like 1 week.
Congrats. I'm loving the background. I need to reevaluate mine.
Well, it's it's something that I built a couple of years or about a year and a half ago or so. With the pandemic, and I was working from home, and I was really starting to think increasingly about video. So I got a camcorder, a Sony 4K camcorder, and got all these lights, and got like a tree with a bunch of monitors on it. So I have this whole. I was really doubling down on trying to do more video, and
It looks
so
great.
so it's just a matter of kind of taking a different path in my career, and
Yeah.
what I was trying to do with it too. But I originally started out as a audio only podcaster and on the radio and all this kind of stuff. So I really came from that background. So
Yeah.
I fully appreciate the spectrum of going video as well as just sticking with audio.
Yeah.
And so you've had this background of doing this podcast, this Tuckered Out with Ami Thakkar, and you've done what, about 150 episodes? Is that about right?
I'll be hitting 150 in about 5 weeks, I think.
Ah,
Yes.
got it.
And just to correct you on the pronunciation, and it's all good. It's Ami
Okay.
Thakkar. So the reason
Oh,
why
yes.
it's
Okay.
Tuckered
Yeah, I've
Out.
always thought it was. Okay, sorry.
It's totally fine. It's totally fine.
Okay.
Yeah, so 150 coming up soon. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, and really the focus of what you've done with this show is to focus on South Asian trailblazers, prominent voices, and experts from around the globe. And I think that's terrific. And in the context of the growth of podcasting in South Asia and Southeast Asia and that whole area, I mean, there's podcasting conferences happening over there, and it's exciting. Actually, my co-host of my other show that I do, my new media show, is actually over there for PodFest, which is holding an event over there in Manila, I guess. But that's,
Very
I mean,
cool.
that's not part of India or anything, but it's close.
Yes. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
That's very exciting. Yeah. Been focusing on, I'm first gen Indian American,
Got it.
born and raised in the US. And so I think the one thing, obviously South Asians, I think India has now surpassed China in terms of population.
Oh yeah, as far as population, yeah.
So I think the South Asian diaspora is so unique and diverse and different.
Yeah.
And I initially started this to really talk about the Indian American experience, actually, because I think the one thing that I wanted to share with audiences is that experience, I consider myself very American, obviously Indian as well, but America is my home. The experience of living here, being born and raised here is unique to other Indians and South Asians around the world. Yeah. So that was the initial kind of context for starting this, and to learn the stories of first gen Indian Americans that were born and raised here. And since then it's expanded to around the world.
Yeah. I mean, it's an important area for the world right now, and especially in podcasting. I mean, I think as we look at what's happening with the podcasting medium right now, it's kind of flatlined in the US. It's kind of not really growing because we've already grown. It's a mature medium here. Yep. But over in other parts of the world too, not just in Asia or Southeast Asia or any of that area, the podcast medium is still in its growth phase. It's still in its newness. Yeah. It's still finding its path in the world around monetization and distribution and distribution as well, right? And how they're going to manage the languages, and how they're going to manage the cultural differences between various parts of that part of the world as well, I would imagine.
Right. Yeah, I think I just read something, I read pod news every day. I think I read something where just today or yesterday, where they were saying only 12 or 15% of people in India, they're just talking about India, are actually listening to podcast. Meaning there's so much more growth. I'm not sure what the number is. I have to fact check that, but so much more growth to go, in that part of the country. I mean, world. Yeah.
And I think we just passed here in the US, and this is this is kind of indicative of what I was saying just a little bit earlier is that we've hit about 90, I think it was 97% of the US population. It knows actually what a podcast is.
That's pretty amazing.
Now, some people in the industry are like pushing back on that because I'm sure a certain percentage of that thinks that it's a show on YouTube, and that's a fairly contentious topic right now.
Yeah, I'm old school about it, so I'm going to go that way. But I get why the numbers are high for sure. Hey, you know what? Podcasting is our industry. I'm happy it's spreading. So.
Yeah, definitely. And I know that your show has been recognized. You're currently on the board of the Podcast Academy with the Ambi Awards, and I used to be on that board as well. I was the first chairperson of that organization when it started.
You're an OG, Rob.
Yeah, back in a little bit of a different time for that organization too. It was very early days, so there wasn't a lot going on with it. It was really just something that we kind of limped to the starting line.
It's an amazing. The past few years I've been on it, and obviously I met you through that. But it's 4 years old now, I believe. This is the fourth.
Yeah, I think so. I think they had their fourth awards ceremony, and I guess you were nominated for like one of the best hosts.
Best indie host. I think we added that category, and I was lucky enough for the members to vote me in. And as you know, these shows, it's exciting to be recognized in, how many podcasts are out there? 5 million now? I've lost track, but.
Well, I mean, a lot of those are archive shows. I think there's only like maybe 300,000 or 400,000 that are active shows.
Shows. Okay. Good to know. Good. I keep putting numbers on it.
Yeah, I think people can feel a little overwhelmed by that because it's like there's 5 million shows that I'm competing with out there, and that's not really entirely true.
This is true. Yeah, no, it's a good reminder for sure. But even with that number, just as an indie podcaster, as you know, like if you're not a celebrity, and don't have this huge network behind you, which I've never had, it's a trek. This is a very slow trek, and I think you really, really have to love this medium in order to continue, because I mean, not to sound cheesy, but I am tuckered out a lot of times. It is exhausting. It's funny that the title actually makes sense now for podcasting. I think, I know a lot of people that have asked me, how do you start? How do you get in? And I always tell people podcasting, it's a low barrier to entry. I think we all know that, but it's a high barrier to get to whatever success means to you. I want to say highly successful. I don't know what that means to each person, but it's definitely, it's been an eye-opening journey this last 4 years for sure.
Yeah, I think that definition of success is I think wildly different for everyone, and I think it's also, there's a lot of kind of like punishment that people impose on themselves based on the results of what they have, and whether or not it's even realistic for them to have the results that they think that they should have.
And that's what I'm learning when I'm talking. I just went to Podcast Evolutions, and it was great to talk to some members of the Podcast Academy, and we talk about numbers and this and that. And honestly, what I try to tell people now, because that was me, not even a year ago, that was me. But as an indie podcaster, if you're counting numbers, you're going to go crazy. It's a difficult hill to climb. I'm not saying it's not possible. It's hard, but I think the one thing I will tell all indie podcasters, any podcaster actually in general, is that do it your way. And it sounds cheesy and hokey, and everyone knows, like, be authentic, but it's true. Do it your own way. Make your own rules. That's the beauty, I think, about podcasting, is you can make your own rules, right? Like, you don't, it's still, it's kind of mature in the US, but we can still play around with podcasting. It's still evolving. And I think that's kind of exciting, that you can create your own way of doing the podcast. And I also will always tell people now, after realizing, okay, Yes, I had this podcast, but wow, last year I got invited to speak in 12 panels, I think. Never thought about panels, never thought about speaking, never thought about writing. But I think the one thing that podcasting can also do is open up avenues you never imagined. And I think this is very exciting about podcasting, I think.
Yeah, and I wanted to show people your website too, because I think that is part of this journey. And I did, and clarify for me too, because I don't know all the back end details of how you're doing your show, but I did notice that you got some help making your website, which I think is smart. To actually
I had a
some help.
graphic designer help me.
Right.
I initially did not, and my initial logo was pretty bad, but it was fine. I think that's the way podcasting is. I would say, honestly, Rob, my first 25, 30 episodes, I can't even look back at them anymore. But that's the main thing. Actually, another tip for anyone that hasn't started is to start, because it's not going to be pretty at the beginning. It's going to be messy. It's going to be confusing. You're going to change so many things along the way, and that's okay. I've changed logos. I've changed so many things. But when I realized that this was exactly what I wanted to do, I was like, okay, let me get serious and let me actually hire someone that knows what they're doing. And so I hired actually a family member who is a graphic designer to help me with the logo, and kind of reel it in. Like, what am I doing exactly? And I'll be honest with you, Rob, I'm still thinking about rebranding again. I think you always have to look forward and see, okay, does this make sense? Because you can't keep beating a dead horse. Is that the saying? I think keep evolving,
Yeah. You have to always be thinking about ways that you can improve.
Yeah.
And add elements to it. That it's the same thing I've done with this show over the 27 episodes, that I keep changing it. How I started it wasn't how I'm doing it now. And so it's an evolution, and you're not reacting, but you're reacting to the feedback that you get, especially in this program, because this is an interactive program. There's a lot of people that come in here, and I thank everybody for this, come in every week, and I see their names over and over again. And I just appreciate everybody coming in and building community here. And that's one of the powers of doing live.
Yeah.
And this is also an audio and video podcast too. So it's available on replay on all of the big social platforms, but it's also a full-fledged podcast too. So, and it does add a level of work to it, that a lot of, being a video podcast as well. So you can get this program in Apple Podcasts as a video. So
that's cool.
Yeah. So, but it does take extra work to do that. It does take knowing how to process the audio file. And fortunately, like a platform like StreamYard does help you do some editing if you need to, and then export it into a version that you can control to some degree, the export on that. But you can also import it into a video editing tool and do additional things, which is what I do with this program. So it's you can do a lot of stuff with podcasting, and it's really like you've chosen. I mean, you started down this path of doing some video, and what you found though is that you preferred the audio side. And I think that's perfectly fine. I think this whole feeling that people have right now that they have to do video or something like that, or they don't have to do video. Start where you feel comfortable. And if eventually you add video, that's great. If not, just do maybe try doing some shorts, pull your phone out and record something for a minute or something like that. You don't have to incorporate it into your production like I am here, but, and that's an important thing here too. And what would you say about that?
I 100% agree. I started video maybe a year and a half ago, halfway. I had done already maybe 80, 90 episodes. And so I started video a little later. And, sometimes, you look back at it and you think, oh my gosh, should I? But at the end of the day, again, it has to be right for you at the right time. And now I'm totally comfortable with it. Now I'm, I have reels going on. I have actually recorded all my episodes fully on video. I haven't posted it on YouTube or anything like that yet, but I'm open to it. I just think there's so much information out there on what to do, how to do it. Yeah, you have to just kind of go with your gut. I really believe that. And just be true to if you're not comfortable and authentic, then your audience will know that, I think.
Yes. Yeah. So when you posted these videos in here that you tried that, what kind of a format? I see that most of them are pretty short. So you were playing around with the shorts.
I was playing around with the shorts. I was working with one editor that was helping me out to put this all together. And now I actually have
knew the idea of just the relative.
Yeah, these are like little teasers, that I had on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn. So I was starting to put those on YouTube. And then I don't know, something in me was like, I just don't feel right. Not even right about it. It wasn't my jam. I wasn't ready for it. Now, I think we were talking previously. I feel like I'm getting now to the point where maybe I want to do it. Maybe I want to try it now. Again, I don't want any podcasters to feel like, oh my God, I'm not doing this, so I'm screwed, or, I'm never going to make it. Or I think you have to just go to your own beat on things. And I feel like I've grown you grow in ways you don't expect, and also I want to enjoy the experience. I don't want to be stressed out about it all the time.
Yeah. I mean, if you add too many layers to this, especially at the beginning, until, you've added maybe some streamlining to the early parts of how you produce the show, and then it's easier just to add this additional element. Are you getting any other help in the production of your show? Are you doing any editing help? Did you outsource anything to anybody?
Yeah, so I want to give a shout out to Genie Media, GINNI. They are doing all my editing and the reels and all that stuff. They have graciously taken me on as a client, kind of on a scholarship basis, because they really believed on my product. And so they are just helping me out to grow, actually. So I've been with them for about a year. And that, as an indie podcaster, is a very big win when you have a production company standing behind you. And that's when at the end of the day, I was going to continue doing this. But when you get that kind of validation and that kind of support, it helps you keep going, for sure. Otherwise, editing, producing reels and videos, it's hard, as you know. It's not easy. It's very time consuming. It's a full-time job, basically. I don't think I could do that because I do have, other parts of my life that I have to focus on. And so it's been a blessing this past year to work with them. And because of them, I know I have grown a lot more.
Yeah, I would imagine that. So what's the relationship like that you have with this production company? I mean, is it expensive? Is it, what's kind of been your flow of that and how that's worked out for you?
So, it's kind of been this, I have been offered I guess you can call it a scholarship, however you want to call it. So it's been, they've done it graciously on the house just because she wants to, the founder, Jeannie Saraswati, wants to support, women of color in the podcasting world. And, there's still very few of us. And so to get that support has been the biggest gift. And so that's honestly, that's elevated me and given me the confidence to continue. Again, like I said, I probably would have, but having their support has changed the whole game for me.
Yeah, I would imagine. Yeah. I mean, you're trying to juggle a lot of things every day. And I think a lot of, especially early podcasters, they are juggling a lot. There's expenses to it. And I think it's a little bit of the challenge that the medium is having right now too, is because it's not, I mean, it can be fairly low cost to be a podcaster, but then again, if you put a lot into it, those costs can add up a little bit. So trying to figure out ways that you can produce content efficiently and consistently, and have an easy pathway to getting them published and live. And then also having these pathways to maybe earn some income from those things is increasingly what people are looking for now. And are there any tools that you're using right now, beyond just, this editing help that you're getting, that helps you publish the show? Are they doing all the publishing too, or are you doing any of that yourself?
Yeah, they are doing everything. I mean, before them, at the first, year and a half, I was on my own.
Right.
It feels also fuzzy because I honestly, Rob, my first episode came out December 2017. I was just looking back at my notes before we were talking. And I was probably, I think, and I might be wrong, but I think I was the first South Asian podcast to come out there. And I was, had a friend that was editing. It was very DIY. And like I said, this first 20, 30 episodes, that God knows what was going on there. I'm like, I'm scared to even hear it. And then I, do have support at home financially. So I was able to hire an editor for kind of the middle part of my journey. And I did get sponsors along the way. For me, sponsorship has been, I've had sponsors for 2-month periods from local businesses or, friends that want to support. It's kind of been a mix of things where they would support me for, 6 episodes or a specific episode. And so I've gone through all that as well. And then last year is when I partnered with Genie Media, which has, I'm telling again, it's just been a whole different ballgame because of them. And so I understand more than anyone, how hard I talk to indie podcasters all the time, how hard it is financially for them, how to get this, across. And I really, and being part of the TPA, that's my one goal is to help support these guys somehow.
Yeah, and I think that there is I think that really cuts to the core of why I think here in the US things have kind of a little bit plateaued for podcasting to some degree. And have you been playing around with any AI tools for the pre-production side of the effort that you've been doing? Because I know I use it a lot.
I haven't.
myself.
I am so scared of AI. I'm like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. I'm just slowly getting into TikTok. So no, I haven't. I think for me, I know it's super interesting. There's so much you can do with. I'm again, like I told you, I'm reading all the newsletters. So I'm aware of what's happening. I just know myself right now, and just I'm sure I will dive into it. It's just I'm gonna do it on my own time. I'm kind of in a great flow right now. I'm enjoying where I am. I'm finally enjoying my journey. And guys, all my indie podcasters out there, I don't look at numbers anymore. I kind of
That's
just
interesting.
go with it. I know. I look at the guest. If at the end of the day, this, Rob, if we don't have good content, it doesn't really matter. So I'm just all about the good guests, great content, talking to my audience, and I'll check it every once in a while. But I feel like at this point now, I have that army of audience, that audience, that crew of people that really love the show. And months and years of me like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to hit 5,000. I'm never going to hit 10,000. I just let it go the past year. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to just have fun. I'm going to have fun. If I could do this for free all day long and talk to really badass South Asian leaders around the world and trailblazers and celebrities and politicians, I would do it anyways. So yeah,
I think that's really interesting, because really what I hear you saying, and I can totally associate this because I've done this myself, how I've mentally thought about it, because numbers to me don't really mean very much. It's more about, I think, what I can get from doing the podcast myself, whether it's learning new things, making human connections with others, and it's not so much important about the size of the audience. I mean, it just has never really been that way for for me, because I've
a strong audience, right? It's about an audience that
it's who it
believes.
is for one thing,
Yeah.
and how connected I feel to those people in how much feedback I get. It is another metric, and I think it may be a sign. I think as we look to the future, and I know that the industry is a little bit, I think, getting a little disenfranchised with the download numbers anyway, right? there's
God, yes. There's so
there's
much.
this yeah, it's like people that are focused on the download numbers because it still doesn't mean a lot. Now the industry has been pulling back on that to some degree. It's not like it used to be in the old days of podcasting where the numbers were just kind of like they were all over the map. I mean,
Right.
you just never really knew for sure how big your real audience was,
Yeah.
right? It was like, you know, like just to give you just a quick example, like Apple makes 6 requests for every episode that they download. So if you were to look in the log files for the server connection with the download of the podcast,
Right.
there's like 6 requests that go along with that.
Wow.
And some of the servers were counting each of those requests 6 times. So you can kind of imagine that in the early days of podcasting, all of our numbers were just kind of like blown up.
I would feel awesome.
My God, I had 10,000 listeners to my show, but when you really analyze it and get it down, no, I had like maybe 1,000.
Right. Yeah, no, totally. It's an interesting process. I think everyone at podcasts kind of has to go through themselves to understand their relationship with numbers, what it means to them. It's a tricky thing because as we, again, going to all these conferences, you network with all these industry heads. And a lot of them, of course, still ask, what are your numbers, and, happy to share. But like, I think at the end of the day, I've realized, I have this little army that believes in the podcast. I love what I'm doing. I think if whatever happens in the future and whoever I end up working with, if I do end up working with anyone, really has to kind of believe in me, not to sound cheesy, but like they have to be excited about me as a host, as a producer, as a storyteller, and, look at the work I've done so far, I think. And so.
Yeah, I think really focusing on what you're contributing to whoever's listening to. I mean, because a lot of people get really freaked out. Oh, I only got 100 listeners to my show. I'm not doing very well. Well, the fact of the matter is, how many times in your life do you present to 100 people? Anything.
Right. Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. I'm like, think about 100 people taking the time out of their day to listen to you. I mean, even 5 people taking time, an hour or 45 minutes out of their day to listen to that's a big deal.
No, I agree with you. I mean, you're having actual impact on people's lives.
Yes.
Even if 5 people. And then what you should do is focus on those 5 people. If you produce a good enough show, those 5 people will tell 5 other people, right, about your show. And then you're up to 10, right? So you're growing. And that's the key thing to think about when you're doing a podcast is how can you add value to other people's lives? And a little bit of the reason why I do this show is to share some of that ground truth of reality of podcasting. I've been doing this for 20 years.
Yep.
And so I've been on the radio, I've been on satellite radio, I've done live video show for like 13, 14 years. And then this show is kind of a new thing, but been doing a lot of different things. And I don't really focus on the numbers here for this show. I mean, I love the numbers of live listeners or live viewers to this because it brings interactivity.
Right. Community.
To the show, and it brings community, right? And as I've brought up on the screen, and I appreciate everybody that's here that makes a comment, that contributes, that enters my giveaway and all the stuff that I do at the end of the show, and then shares questions, which we're gathering questions. So ask your question if you want to ask something of me specifically, or of our guest here, and we would love to hear your question. But let's move on and talk about another aspect here. And I know that a lot of the reason that you do the show that you do is to help share with your community the complexities around growing up, as you term, a brown person, a person from another culture here in the U.S., and how does that shape what you do in the program and the type of topics that you guys cover in the program?
Right. So I'll rewind back a little bit. So, I started this show 2017, called it Tuckered Out, because I actually was tuckered out. We were on our fourth move. We're on our
There's a reason why you named it that.
Yes. And I'm also, my last name is pronounced Tucker. And so I've been called Tucker my whole life.
Okay.
Yeah. See, there's a reason behind the madness.
I'm learning more all the time here.
And I, have a husband that's very, very busy, and that has moved us around the world. And we were on our fourth move. I had a 3-year-old and a newborn. And I'm actually technically a lawyer. I know it's shocking to hear, but I was a lawyer once upon a time. And because of all these moves and, now having 2 little kids, I was tuckered out. I was inspired by cereal, which a lot of us were. And although I know you started before that, but so yeah, I started it and I focused on the South Asian diaspora just because I grew up first generation Indian American. And just have a great network of really amazing South Asian friends in the US and around the world. And I call my podcast now, looking back at the 100, almost 50 episodes, my therapy session. I think, growing up as any immigrant family will tell you, a child of immigrants, my parents immigrated here in the 60s for higher education. You're living kind of in 2 different worlds at times when you're growing up, and it's a dual identity. And we've all heard that story. And I think I was never fully ashamed of being Indian here, but I had never really fully embraced it either, because you're trying to be mainstream. You're trying to be part of the crowd. And I think it's funny. I started this podcast for the reasons I told you before, but now I realize I may have started this podcast for the little girl version of me, to understand my story, to hear other people around the US or in the world, their stories of growing up in different places, having these dual identities in the UK, Singapore, everywhere around the world, where we all have these shared similarities and shared stories. And we could talk about funny things our parents did. It kind of all feels familiar, but then, it's also interesting to hear the unique perspectives from people that have grown up in different countries outside of, South Asia. And so, yeah, I think now I realize I've started this kind of for myself to discover myself. And it's been a much more inward journey than I thought. If you hear any episodes, especially the past 15, 20, I'm like, oh my God, this is like a revelation. I'm like realizing stuff about my childhood and my parents and my culture and religion. And, yeah. And another point I wanted to add was I called it Tuckered Out because I was kind of betting on myself. I didn't want to call it South Asian leaders and celebrities. I didn't want to call the podcast that. I didn't know what I wanted this to be. I just knew I wanted to do it. So I kind of named the podcast based on who I was, which I know is not a normal thing. And I've been asked many times because it doesn't really relay, oh, you're interviewing South Asian, trailblazers. But yeah, it's stuck and it's worked, and it's been a fun journey for me.
So how do you pick your guests? What's the criteria that you usually run through in your mind? And for me, for many years, it's a very complicated story. It's just, it's like, why I invited you to come on. It's like, I'm trying to tell a story in this podcast. I'm trying to take the audience on a journey through maybe less discussed areas of podcasting that's a little bit more focused on kind of the psychology of podcasting,
right,
and the real ground truth of what is actually goes on with a podcaster when they're doing what they're doing, and its impact on their lives, and the impact on their families, and their impact on others. And this is a topic that really doesn't get talked about. And I do think that maybe that's a little bit of your topic too. I don't know if it's so much focused on podcasters, but it's also about the experience that the Indian Americans have been through while they've lived here and grown up here in the U.S., and how that maybe shaped your experience, right?
Sure. I think Tuckered Out, if I think about it right now, it really does reflect just kind of motherhood and having a partner, a husband who I'm, kind of following his journey, and I'm trying to while following his journey, I'm trying to figure out my journey. So it's a bunch of things. And also, being Indian American, having these dual identities and understanding what that means. But I think, rewinding back a little bit when you're asking about guest, I think like he was kind of complicated. Like I don't, initially it was friends. I'm like, whoever wants to be on this, please let me know. And we have a really, really great network of South Asian friends. And then, as time has gone and I've grown, it's been more to me. Sure, the celebrities are great. The big names are great. But to me, it's the South Asians that have stories to tell, that have had, impact. It's an important word, that have had an impact on this world, that are doing interesting things, that have, some of my favorite interviews have been guests that don't have any spotlight on them, and that I feel like, wow, like people need to know about what you're doing and what you stand for. And so it's a mix of things. Sometimes I'll interview people based on the current news, what's going on in the world. When COVID started and Pfizer was rolling out the vaccines, I found a guy that was really high up in Pfizer to talk about that. So like it's a mix of things. And I want to make sure I'm mixing up the topics, the industries, the points of views. This is not a political podcast. This is just, the main thing is I want all stories to come out, all points of views to come out, and people to understand each other, because that's the point of, I think, podcasting, is to kind of open up the world a little bit more in a authentic way.
Yeah. I do think that is a trend that's moving through media creation today. And I think it's starting to even flow into places like YouTube and others, that these real conversations, real authentic, and also, being candid, sharing what may be considered to be, maybe too personal sometimes, maybe something that is people are increasingly looking for right now.
I think we all need it. One of my favorite podcasts is Armchair Expert, and I think Dax Shepard is.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think he's one of the best interviewers out there. But he has said this many times, where he has gone on these talk shows at nighttime, and has his 7 minutes to talk or 8 minutes to tell a story. And he's like, you can never really be fully yourself, right? You have this limited time, and podcast is the only medium where you can literally just be yourself and have real conversations that mean something. I don't think any other medium does that. It's pretty special, I think.
Yeah, and I think, that doesn't always equate to, just because you're being candid and you're being authentic, doesn't always equate to a big audience, right?
No.
And I think that, if you can detach yourself from that expectation, and then really, like you said, and I think after 150 episodes, I think you're really coming into understanding what this medium is really all about. And that's about, what you get from it, and doing the show and connecting with others, and feeling like you're maybe having an impact on other people's lives, and helping other people through difficult times. And I know back when I think about the early days of podcasting, one of the things that doesn't get talked about much anymore was the impact of the early comedians in podcasting, and how, if you think back to the early comedians, a lot of those people were very troubled individuals. They were alcoholics, they were drug addicted, they had a lot of mental problems, because that kind of was part of that creativity of being a comedian, is that you're always pushing the envelope of culture and society. And I just heard lots of stories from these comedians being approached by their audiences when they were doing a podcast and just thanking them profusely because they got them through a difficult time in their life.
Yeah, I can imagine. I'm sure you have many stories on it. Again, I know I'm bringing up Dax Shepard again, but he's like a current example of that, I think.
Yeah, right. No, I agree. Yeah.
For me, that's kind of my go-to to get through some things, at times. And so it can be very powerful.
Sure. It can be kind of therapeutic for you too. If you feel like, life is challenging to you and you feel like, a lot of people are feeling disconnected from their own communities because of, for whatever reason. There's lots of reasons for that, whether it be students that are disconnected because they had to stay home during COVID, or, lots of, disconnection that people experience today. And I think unfortunately, I think it may get worse before it gets better.
It's hard to describe these times. It just feels like a weird cloud over a lot of things. And like you said, it might get worse. But I think that's why we need these kind of discussions. We need to. It's so basic, but we all need to talk to each other. I mean, at the end of the day,
And it's always better to do things in person. There's no question, but I do think that the world is shifting towards that, not having as many opportunities for that kind of interaction. I mean, are you finding yourself less connected in the real world?
I will tell you, I'm actually fighting to find myself more connected. So it's what I was just talking to my husband last night. Having kids is a different experience because you are forced to be a little bit more with the school community. Like, it forces you to do other things that, you wouldn't do if you didn't have kids. So it does help. But I recently started volunteering. I am realizing that I need it. I need community. Community is so important for happiness, and I am finding myself doing it more and more, and finding these little groups of communities with the schools, with volunteer, opportunities, with the podcast academy, like just being able to be with not even like-minded people, just with people, and being able to talk about things in person. I'm actually doing more now because I feel like it's gone down so much. And so I think it's really important, especially as a podcaster, where you can be recording by yourself for weeks and weeks.
Yeah. And I find that it's really the only way that I can stay connected. It is by doing, I do a lot of, Zoom calls. I do a lot of those kind of calls. I don't spend as much time traveling as I used to before COVID. So like back in 2019, I was like on the road 3 weeks out of the month, traveling around the country, going to podcasting events. But over the last 3 or 4 years, it's been like increasingly just staying home more, which has driven me to video more.
But at least you're doing something. That's great that you're trying to shift it around. But I think it affects all of our mental health for sure. I just did a trip to Ireland. I haven't left my kids more than a couple of days. And I told my husband, I'm like, you know what? I need a week off and just to be with friends and not do anything. Just be with my best friends. It's been years since I've done that. And I felt like a new person. It's very rejuvenating.
So you doing any legal work on the side or anything like that? Are you doing anything else on the side? Yeah, that's okay.
That's pretty much, my brain has officially melted from all that stuff.
I got it.
No, not really of an interest. Obviously, it's always that legal side, that lawyer side of me is always there. I am heading governance for the TPA, so I still have that nerdy, I love contract side of me, just to look over. But no, nothing. I think my journey career-wise has been crazy. I did the law thing, and then we moved abroad. I worked for a fashion startup. I worked for Condé Nast India.
Oh, yeah.
For OK and Hello magazine in Dubai. I worked for the Uber of the Middle East, nonprofits. I mean, I have checked every part of my tuckered outness. But yeah, I think for me, the creative side has always been really strong. But growing up in a South Asian house where, mom and dad had their masters, my brother is a doctor, that was kind of expected, a lawyer, doctor, engineer kind of thing. And so I did that path, and I'm grateful for it. Looking back, if I really had known myself well, would I have gone to journalism school? Yeah, I probably would have. I just didn't even reflect on that. And so, but I ended up here somehow.
So did you do any other media? I mean, other than kind of the kind of print work that you were involved in, but did you do any TV in your past or any other media?
Never did TV. My first job after I went to UT Austin, and my first job after
You did?
UT,
Okay.
I did. I'm a Longhorn.
Well,
I worked at Enron, if you remember Enron.
I do.
And,
Yeah.
that didn't work out. And so
I was going to say that was probably an interesting experience.
Oh,
we could probably do a whole podcast just talking about your experience there, right?
So many great stories. It's ridiculous. But after Enron and before law school, I ended up moving to Bombay for a year.
Oh, you did? Oh, wow.
Whole
Okay.
other podcast.
Yeah, but there's a whole other one there too. My life in Bombay.
Life in Bombay at 23.
Yeah.
I ended up becoming a backup Bollywood dancer for a pop star. I ended up working at radio stations. Again, this whole creative side of me hadn't come out, and I was just trying to get it out before I had to go back to law school or back to med school, whatever I was going to do. So yeah, did that. I attempted TV over there. I'm not a TV person, and it's totally fine. I've accepted it. It's great. But yeah, I think I've tried so many of these different avenues throughout the years, and podcasting is the only thing that stuck, and the passion I found in my 40s. And another lesson for anyone listening: it's never too late. It's never too late to start. It's never too late for any of this. There's no timeline. Yeah.
So how would you say your journey? So you've kind of been doing this show about the experiences that you've had. I mean, over the last couple of years, how would you say things have evolved and changed too? Do you think things have generally gone better, or do you think? I mean, is there more understanding in the world today? I guess of the differences. I guess I
think there's more wanting to understand.
Right.
There's more. Just speaking about my podcast and my experience myself, I'm feeling a lot more outreach from outside my community because, obviously the community knows about me, and that's a whole other story about South Asians supporting South Asians. I still think we need to do better about that.
Right.
Because there's still this whole, is there enough room at the table for all of us mentality? And so I'm feeling a lot more outreach from other communities, and I think just getting invited to different things now, and, panels and this and that. Yeah, it's exciting and it's great, but it also reflects that people are wanting to hear these stories and are open to different points of views. And I think everyone really wants to open up and understand other communities. I think it's there for sure, because everyone's exhausted, tuckered out. I think everyone's tuckered out.
Yeah, right.
I think the world is tuckered out, basically.
Yeah, I think that it is an interesting time from the perspective of the different ethnic and religious, as well as racial kind of differences in our society, and how we've been shifting towards greater acceptance and understanding and things like that. I just kind of wonder how that's going to evolve, and how that's going to change the fabric of our society as you look into the future. And do you see it moving in a good direction, or do you see it kind of still in a state of flux?
I think still in the state of flux. I think there's still a lot of road bumps, but as we all know, nothing stays the same. I think
It's
all
true.
cases in life, history repeats itself, as we all know. Again, I don't think either of us have words to describe this time in our lives.
No, it's definitely weird.
It's just weird. Like, I guess weird is the only thing I can think of, but
right.
there's an undercurrent, there's always an undercurrent of people that want to see this change. There will be change. Nothing lasts forever. This too shall pass. All those sayings. But yeah, I think still state of flux. We're all, especially in we're all very divided here right now.
Where do you think that evolves to? I mean, I know that there must be some sort of a desire that we have in our society, our culture, for where we want to be, right? I mean, it seems like we're all kind of pushing for change.
Right.
It's not always clear to me what that change actually looks like when we get there.
I don't know what that looks like either, Rob, but I will tell you, we've lived in, obviously Texas. I've lived in Houston, Austin, Dallas. I've lived in Arkansas.
Yeah.
I lived in Greenwich, Connecticut, lived in India.
Oh, you have? Well, I'm in Connecticut. Actually, I have a doctor's appointment in Greenwich coming up.
I remember we were fellow Connecticut. I don't even know what the word is. Connecticut.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Something like that.
Yeah. I've lived in obviously India and Dubai. So I've lived in very different environments, very different religious communities, points of views, political communities. My friends in Arkansas, think very differently than my friends in Connecticut. Right. And so just from my own experience, and I'm lucky enough to have been able to live in all these just interesting, unique places. It really starts by talking to each other. I know, again, but the answer to your question, I don't know what the change looks like, but there's no way to even get to that point unless we start talking to each other, like really talking and not tweeting. And I mean, all this stuff, I think it's just, I've made friends in these areas that have completely different points of view than I do, even here in Dallas. And that's okay.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I think
the beauty of America is that we have that. I think that's this is the best part of our country. And instead of embracing it all, like, it's dividing us. And I'm like, well, we are a melting pot. This is why we're strong. But for some reason right now, it's making us weaker.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's an unfortunate kind of result of the internet, unfortunately. I mean, if you're going to blame something, I think it gets back to the openness of the internet. I was involved in the early days of kind of promoting the internet, and sometimes I feel a little bit kind of like maybe I opened Pandora's box by doing a nationally syndicated radio show on the internet and the web in the early days.
Well, I think
it kind of opened this view into the world that was kind of like, maybe it was better when it was still in the box.
Yeah. You know what, though? It was never going to stay in the box.
No, that's true. Unfortunately,
busted out some way or somehow. It's kind of like opening up the scar and just letting it all out.
Turn off the Band-Aid, right? I mean, you're going to see that cut, right?
Yeah.
And it's going to bleed and
it on forever. And so I think we're just going through however long this lasts, we're letting this scar heal. I think we just have to kind of sit back and try to be kind to each other. Seriously.
Yeah. So how do you see your podcast kind of moving forward? Is there any kind of evolutions that you're thinking about it, or is it just kind of what you've been saying here? You're just going to continue down that path. Is there anything that you're wanting to emphasize differently going forward?
I think, like, continue down the path. I'm looking at starting maybe another show underneath the Tuckered Out umbrella.
Oh, okay.
Potentially. It's lots of talks right now. And I think another thing I've discovered is my love for writing. And so I'll focus on writing more and, speaking even, and getting to talk at these different events and panels about the South Asian experience. And so, I mentioned it before, the way everything has branched out, the opportunities has been so unexpected and like fun. And I think after years of stressing about numbers and trying to partner with a network. It's kind of nice to let it all go and be like, you know what? I'm just going to make my own opportunities. I'm going to have fun with this. I'm going to do what feels good, what feels good to me and what feels fun. I want to work with good people. So yeah, I think always evolve. It's always important to evolve and continue thinking about new ideas and new things and not to stay stagnant. I won't do that. So yeah, summertime is a good time to figure out the kind of next steps.
So I wanted to share, this is your podcast on Apple Podcasts. So I know it's hard to read because the text is so small, but
yes,
just trying to give people an idea of what it looks like when they go find your show. And so that's that. And let's see what else. I think that's, well, it's also on Spotify too. And then I also wanted to share a screenshot of the Ambies, which you are a part of, and I used to be a part of back when I was on the board. And so this is it here, and it's basically an annual awards for audio excellence. And I always thought it was interesting how the awards never really added the word podcast in it.
I should know this, actually. Michelle just told me why we called it the Ambies.
Well, no, I mean, yeah, I was involved in the picking of the name.
Okay.
It was kind of like, it was a good name. I think it was unique. It sounded like it was an awards show or something like that, but it never used the word podcast in the
Maybe
subtitle.
It's start that way because it's so like evolve. It's like podcast is evolving now, so I think audio encompasses it all.
Yeah, I think also there was a little bit of, I think the executive director came from the Audio Book Publishers Association, right? Okay. And I think what the thought was at the time is that podcasting can encapsulate audiobooks too. So it was almost like if you call it a podcast and you're pigeonholing it into one particular type of audio.
Right.
And I can kind of see that to a degree, but but it is a little bit of a disconnect to some degree on the naming, considering everybody that's involved in this is doing a podcast.
Right. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I think overall, I think it's smart to use the word audio because I think now, I mean, I don't know what you think, but I think when people think audio, they mostly think podcast, nowadays. Well, at least here, I think.
Yeah, I think, well, and that's even kind of shifting to what people perceive to oftentimes what they see in YouTube right now too. Yeah. It's just like us right now, we're live in YouTube and people can see us talking on this, and we actually are a podcast.
Yeah, totally.
But we're also on a YouTube channel. So it's kind of like walking this fine line, and people are perceiving it correctly in this case, but it's not every case. Not every show on YouTube is a podcast in the traditional sense. So I think it's interesting. But I wanted to shift gears. Thank you so much for being on the show. And if you wanted to stick around and watch me give away a couple of things,
let's do it.
Let's do that. And here is the giveaway tool that I had mentioned at the beginning of the show. I'll bring it up on the screen here, and we will push the draw button so you can see it on the screen there. It's that little blue box there. So if you wanted to enter the giveaway to win StreamYard Puddles Duck and a Puddles or StreamYard mug, type in the hashtag #TheYard, just like what you're seeing on the screen right here. This is an example of it, and that'll get you entered into the giveaway. So I'm going to hit the button. So get your entry in there quick. I see Muttnuts Crazy Crafting got the entry in, so I appreciate that. And so hurry up and type it in as fast as you can. I know when I type in something like that, I don't know if you're this way as well, is sometimes I mistype or something like that. So I'll give you an extra second here to get it in. Oh, I see people are putting it in here. So, okay, Rick, terrific. So I think we got everybody in. So let's go ahead and push the draw button and see who's going to win here. And let me start the music up again, and we can have some excitement on that side. All right, it's a little loud. So, okay, let's go ahead and push the button now and see who's gonna take home the merch. All right, here we go. This is always the most exciting part of the program. Micah or Mika, Flelons POFTG is the winner. So I hope I said that right. Congratulations.
I think it's Micah. I don't know, actually.
Micah. It's probably Micah. You're exactly right. Yep. So congratulations. Send me an email to rob.greenlee@gmail.com with your address, and I will submit that to the StreamYard team, and we will get you out those items. So here is my email address. So just send me an email and be happy to get your name over to the StreamYard team, and we'll get those items shipped out to you as soon as they can get to it. So it's kind of fun to have puddles, Duck.
Yeah, so. I gotta try out for that next time.
Okay. And then the mug I don't actually use very often because I'm always using it as a prop. But so congratulations, and well, let's move on and jump to our Q&A. And let's see here. Let's turn this off, and we'll bring Amy back up. I said it wrong again. I'm sorry.
Ami Thakkar. I know. I keep forgetting to send the. It's all good.
Okay, thank you. So let's go ahead in the Q&A section of the show, and let's see if I can find a good question here. Okay, let's see here. Looks like Gator McCluskey writes, I've had an issue with Chrome and stuttering videos. Switch to Firefox and it works fine. Any thoughts? Well, I think it's interesting. So you may have an issue with computer resources with Chrome. Chrome uses probably a lot more computer resources, which means memory on your computer, than Firefox does, generally, I would say. So that may be why it's causing that type of an issue. But that's just a speculation on my part. I'd have to look at your computer specifically to see how that is. But as far as using StreamYard, Chrome should work really well. That's what I'm using right now to do this program. So I think it really gets back to how many tabs you have open, what other programs that you're running, but that'll cause you to have a little bit of stuttering of a video. And occasionally I have it too. So that's one of the trade-offs of using a browser-based kind of system to do live streaming and do show production, is that you are dependent on the resources of your browser and your computer more than if you're using, let's say, an application or something like that that's installed on your computer. So I hope that answers your question. And let's go ahead and pull in another one here. Genesis 1 asks, facts. I'm only 6 weeks in and I've changed so many things. Well, I think that's a terrific observation, and I'm sure both of us would confirm that.
Yes, do not worry, my friend. I think that first few months I went from a round table discussion of 5 co-hosts to just me. I don't even know. It's fine. This is the time for you to figure it out. Have fun with it. Do not stress. You will get to the point where you feel like, okay, this is the format I want. And even that will change after a while. So I think it's healthy. This is all healthy stuff.
Yeah. And I think that there is something to this aspect that, some people say to produce a bunch of episodes in advance, especially if you're starting a show. And I kind of dissuade people. I kind of say maybe do maybe 1 or 2, maybe at the most. And that is because of this particular example here. Right. Is that people will want to evolve and change. And if you spend a lot of time producing maybe 10 episodes or something like that in advance of you launching your show, basically, you may find that in episode 3, you want to change everything. Yeah. That means that those those 6 episodes you're probably not going to use, or you're going to have to re-edit, or you're going to have to do something different with them.
Right.
So anyway, that's just kind of a personal preference kind of a thing, but each person needs to make their own choices on that. And then let's see, Mutt Nuts Crazy Crafting writes here, I do all my editing with my OCD. I don't trust anyone else to do my editing. Okay. Yeah, I get that. If you're really into having control over what you're doing, there's nothing like doing it yourself.
Right. No,
you're also responsible for what happens too.
It's hard to let go. It's hard to let go of your baby.
Yeah. Did you go through that?
Yeah, for sure.
When you handed off your show to your production team?
It takes time. You have to, work with them. You really have to go back and forth for a while. But I will tell you, once you are able to have that relationship and let go, it is so freeing.
It's like taking a breath of fresh air.
It takes time. It's okay to not want to. It's kind of like having your own kid. It's hard for that kid to walk out that door. So makes sense.
Yeah, it is kind of hard for some people to let go. I think I would have a hard time letting go, to be totally honest with you. I don't know why. It's not that I'm compulsive about it or anything like that. It's more to do with just like, I kind of want to just do it all myself, right? It's just not, it's not going to be me if it's not me. So that I don't know. I mean, I could be persuaded at some point to get production help at some point.
And don't get me wrong, I listened to the final cut and edit it myself, and then copy. So I make sure it's my voice for sure, but help is also good too. If you're, I think whatever works for you, and no right or wrong answers. So
looks like I think it's probably a problem on my end.
No worries.
Okay, I think we were paused there for a second. Okay. Genesis 1 30-minute podcast writes, totally understand. People think my podcast is about the Bible because of the Genesis 1 thing, because of the name. So you do have to be careful of the naming that you have of your podcast, because sometimes it implies things that maybe you didn't intend to imply. I don't know if your podcast has some connection to the Bible or not, but it doesn't sound like it would have to.
Yeah. But actually thought of Phil Collins.
Right. And there's a band called Genesis, right? I mean, all those kind of things. So there's other meanings to that word that could be implied by a name. So it is important to think about those relationships and also do name research on Google or any of the search engines, as well as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever, and just find out all of the other shows that maybe are using the same name that you are, and just make sure that, most of those shows are dead shows or something like that. You're not competing with the exact same name.
Well, the funny story, I didn't realize that Tucker Carlson had a podcast called Tuckered Out as well.
Okay, yeah.
So different audience, and I am sure no one will mix us up, but yeah.
And it looks like so Alexis Fowler writes, today's YouTube podcasts are better than television. Spectrum keeps sending mail to me to come back. LOL. Yeah, I would say I'm spending a lot more time watching content on YouTube. If you want to call it a podcast, that's fine with me. If you don't, that's fine with me too. But I do think that oftentimes they're better than television. I think I get more value out of them than some of the television things that are out there.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but are you that way too?
No, for sure. I mean, then again, I'm like, there's so much content out there. I get kind of confused. There's so much. I want to watch like everything. So sometimes I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to get ADD. But yeah, I mean, Alexis is right. There's so many great podcasts out there on YouTube. It's fantastic.
Yeah, no, that's true. And Rocky, what's it? Rocky Godson, Ali. The recommendation of what is that? Web stream, as you said, is not tasteful like StreamYard. I'm not sure what that is. So
I don't know.
Our bandwidth went down again.
Okay.
So yeah, so Rocky, I'm not sure what that word means there. Was it weight stream? So I'm not familiar with that. Right.
Yeah.
And then this is the last question here. So Alexis Fowler writes, I started listening to this channel and reading a book on how to build better online communities. Oh, okay.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's what watching the StreamYard channel or just this particular podcast channel.
Yeah, that's great. Well, either one.
Yes. Yeah, well, exactly. I appreciate you being here. So
yeah,
thank you so much. For,
I think that's a, I know that you said this last question. I think it's a great way to end. I think, it just reminds me at the end of the day, this really is about building community. It really is. And
I think it's increasingly becoming more like,
right.
That's the purpose of it. Right.
It's the purpose of it. I think that's so important. I'm going to get a little nerdy on everyone, but I think, Harvard had done the 70-year study. They have a class at Harvard, a happiness class. What is happiness? I don't know the exact name of it. I'm botching it right now. And they did a 70-year study. And I believe, again, fact check me on this, but I believe the number one kind of point to remember for happiness is having community around you at the end of the day. Being around your friends and family and community is one of the best things you can do for longevity and a happy life.
Yeah, and I think that the terminology that's happening increasingly around even, all these consumption platforms for content right now is that the concept of audience isn't so much, that's like a legacy term to describe a one-way relationship with people, right? I think when you start talking about community, you're talking about interactivity.
Yeah.
And that's interactivity between community members as well as with, let's say, a host of a show like this one.
Yeah.
And that interchange of three parties involved in this relationship, and then also, having a guest on like yourself, and it adds just a magical dynamic to this whole thing.
Yeah.
And what really excites me about doing live. I've always kind of done a little bit live, but I've done a lot of pre-recorded stuff too.
Right.
But there's just something about live that just really kind of has an energy that you just can't replace by pre-recording. But it depends on what you want as a content creator too. What kind of content, how much time you have, what your availability is to do something at the same time. Like this show is the same time every week on the same day, and it goes for an hour and 15 minutes or so, and everybody moves on with their day, right? Yeah. Or their evening.
Great what you've built, and kudos and congrats to you. It's so good seeing you do this.
Yeah, and I'm thankful to the StreamYard folks because they basically enabled me to do this on their channel, and their channels have embraced my show, and there's lots of people watching to the show after it's over with, and I just appreciate everybody for coming in here and participating with me. And I have my own YouTube channel as well. So if you want to see some of the other content that I produce, I do a couple other different shows too that I would love to have you check out and see if there's a connection there. And I do another show live every week about podcasting, and it's this one as well. So if you wanted to check out that one too, it's basically been around for about 12 or 13 years. And we talk about the podcast industry and kind of what's happening, which is different than this show. This show is really getting into the creator's mind and understanding what makes the creator tick.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important for a platform like a StreamYard, because this is a platform that has the whole spectrum. It's got pre-recorded, it's got live, it's got video and audio and all the tools that make it all come together. So that's the power of it. Well, thank you so much. And I want to thank everybody that's participated in this with me tonight. Thank you for being here with me. And I'll be back next week with another episode of Podcast Tips with Rob Greenlee. So thank you so much for being here. And thank you.
Thank you, Rob. This was fun.
Yep. All right.
Take care.
Good night, everybody.